Hello and welcome to Point and Clink here on twitch.tv/ live action roleplay. This is our TED Talk with a drink show where we talk about different lectures and topics. Our topic for today is WildCard. So basically, whatever the presenter wanted to present. Originally was comedy, then we realized trying to present something on comedy is a little bit too much of a pressure. I have learned this now, so we were very happy to get these particular lectures. So I am going to have people introduce themselves. So we're going to start off with Jono. Jono, let us know your pronouns and a little bit about yourself or a little bit about the lecture you're about to present. So say hi, Jono.
Hello, I go by Jono. My pronouns are he, him, and I will be looking at class struggle and division in the United States via the lens of moonshine versus bourbon. And if you've ever heard the phrase military brat, I'm a bit of an academic brat. Born in Southern California, out to Baltimore, up to Long Island, New York, out to the Bay Area, out to Britain, back to the Bay Area, and then most recently I spent 7 years living in Eastern Tennessee out near Knoxville. And then all my family, they're from the South, like South Georgia, North Florida area. In my parents' generation, they're the only two members of the family that have left the South outside of military service. And in my generation, myself, my brother, and one of my 9 cousins are the only ones that have left the South outside of military service. And so for me, this particular subject is pretty near and dear.
All right, thank you, Jono. Next, we're gonna go to Trevor. Say hi, Trevor.
Hey everyone, I'm Trevor Gittlehuff. I'm an archaeologist that have been doing that for over a decade now. Really got into it when I left with my parents to go sail around the world when I was 5, which can kind of get you involved in dealing with a lot of cool ruins and shipwrecks and things like that. Got my degree in archaeology at University of California, Santa Barbara, and then got a master's degree over in East Carolina University over in North Carolina. So, I've been back and forth across both coasts several times, as well as going around the world. And yeah.
All right, thank you, Trevor. Next, we have our co-host, Tessa. Say hi, Tessa.
Hi everyone. I cannot compare to the sheer worldliness of our other hosts, but I'm Tessa. I am from Tacoma, Washington. I'm currently in Seattle, Washington, so that shows you about how far I've gone. I went to Portland for college, during which I performed the various random experiments that led me to my presentation about tree lobsters. There's a funny story somewhere in there, and we'll get to it. So yeah, that's about all I've got compared to world traveling.
Thanks, Tessa. And I am your host, Ryan Omega, and my presentation is on the Golden Girls because I am a very, very, very hardcore Golden Girls fan to the point of I can give a lecture on the kitchens of the Golden Girls. And it was originally something that I had written before, but there are more contemporary takes on it now on how much production design tells a story of women who lived in 1985 in Miami, Florida specifically, especially older women, and how that relates itself to a series that is considered iconic. As for my background, I went to UC Berkeley, studied and majored in English, got a BA in English, and but a lot of the stuff that I did my research in was in fairy tales, folk tales, and creative writing. And my creative writing was under Maxine Hong Kingston, well-known Asian American writer. So that is my particular background. So now, before we begin, Tessa, if you can explain the drinking rules as they apply to this show.
All right, so presentations should have some form of visual element, like a presentation, something to show, or you have to take a healthy sip or chug or a shot if you're really aggressive for that penalty. Other penalties include surpassing 3 minutes and every 3 minutes thereafter. So if you had a 9-minute, 30-second presentation, that'd be surpassing 3, 6, and 9 for a total of 3. Every time a cat appears on the screen, not on purpose, do not pick up your cat. It is a party-wide shot/chug fest. And if you make a disclaimer, perhaps, oh, this is a stupid presentation, ha ha ha, that's also a definite penalty chug shot. But if it's a trigger warning, that's totally fine. There's the rules.
All right. Now, in order to determine the order of the presentations, we all roll a d20. And the lowest roll goes first, I believe?
That's right.
All right.
Don't crit fail unless you want to go first.
I mean, you can. I roll a crit success, so I guess I'm going last.
I rolled a 12.
Got a 15.
Did you both roll 15?
I got a 13.
Oh, 13.
Ah.
Okay. So,
Oh,
Tessa, I think you are going first, and then followed by...
Oh, hi, Raid.
Yeah. Hello, Raid. Hello, Talgahurst. Thank you for rating. Let's see. Jono, are you 15 or 13?
13.
13. Okay, so... All right, thank you. Jono, you're going next. Trevor, you're going third, and I am going last. Let me go ahead and adjust my... Let me adjust my things.
Order to things.
Yeah, the order of things. Great. Then Jono is... Oops, wait. There. That goes beneath there. This goes beneath there. Okay, great. All right. We are now ready to play the feud, or we're gonna start. Or we're gonna start off with Tessa. The share screen has been enabled, so anytime you are ready, and I'll handle the timer.
All right, let's see if I can't do this.
All right.
Intelligence of a tree lobster. All right, can you see it?
Yes, we can see it. Yep, there we
All
go.
right, let me start a timer on myself. I'm not normally the one that goes first, so give me a second there.
Yeah, I'll have you set the timer.
Clock app, don't fail me now. Right, ready, set, go. So originally, this is the presentation I did in my phylogenetics final. With help from Cecilia Bueno, Ella Santana Proper, Professor Greta Binford, and Digital Initiatives team because I had to run this on a supercomputer via proxy. But we're not going to go this hardcore. We're just going to talk tree lobsters, baby. Everyone loves tree lobsters, but they don't know what they are. That's probably for the best. If you don't like creepy bugs, this is probably not the presentation for you, but they're harmless. They're just little chubby little bugs that are kind of bad. So before we get into what any of that is, I'm going to tell you a story about why I care so much about tree lobsters, though they were essentially a flighting experimental annoyance in my life. Imagine a scene in which I was so desperate to get out of the lab, because we had to perform this in a basement laboratory, that I had bought a $4 bottle of grocery outlet bargain market wine, and like a good little person, put it outside of the door to the science lab. It was about 12:30 a.m., hoping that one of these runs would be a success. Because every time you run 4.6 gigabytes of genome through anything, it's not going to run every time. I think it took at least 9 tries. Me and Cecilia, we're down there. It finally works. We celebrate. We're cheering. We have our little glasses full of nothing because we didn't take it into the lab, full of germs. They got outside and someone had stolen our $4 bottle of sulfate-filled Australian Zinfandel. We bought Australian specifically because it related back to the tree lobster, the world's rarest insect, and something I can never forget. Where is the world's largest / rarest kind of tree lobster? Why, it's on Lord Howe Island. Well, it used to be. The Lord Howe Island tree lobster slash stick insect, I guess, if you want to be uncool about it. It's actually now only found on Ball's Pyramid. Yes, that's right. That's the only place it exists in the wild, is on Ball's Pyramid. Does it look like a lobster? Not necessarily. This is Ball's Island. It looks like a terrifying Bond villain-like lair fortress, because it is. On this island is a single shrub, and underneath that single shrub exists the extant 24, that's it, just 24 that we know of, bugs that exist in the wild. It's their own little secret lair, where they pair for life like adorable penguins and make creepy lobster babies. This is just like a man with a golden gun's creepy random island, in that it carries like one big tree, and then very small annoying creatures like knickknacks or something live there. Well, is it really a lobster? Crustaceans are very similar to stick insects, but it's not actually the same thing. In phylogeny, there are trees, long story short, Darwin, where things converge and have different traits based from a common ancestor, but they can also have convergent traits where they're very, very, very genetically distant, share a root somewhere, but they end up similar. Like, you know that thing where everything evolves to be a crab? It's like that, except a lobster in a tree. It's fine. These little buggers are those. They are happily taking a nap together because this is a mated pair of a male and female. The males are smaller, and it's really rare for bugs to like mate for life. I think they might have had that trait because they live only on one place forever. Long story short, the first little guys that look like Men in Black extras, that is the Lord Howe Island stick bug. These little guys from Bug's Life, a worse version of Bug's Life, and your museum are not. It went extinct in 1918, at least they thought, because these were originally found on Lord Howe Island, which was discovered, quote, quote, in 1788. It had tons of bugs. Lord Howe himself found these bugs, named them, apparently, supposedly, ate one, tastes great. They used them as fishing baits because they were everywhere. Look in a tree, lobster. Look on the ground, lobster. Under a bush, lobster. Couldn't miss them. But then, bring the SS Macambo, and everything went belly up as soon as it crashed on the island, and brought with it rats, and more rats, and some more rats. Because if you're a rat, paradise itself is looking up in a tree and getting a free Vegas-style buffet of lobster. And they have no natural instincts to like run or hide or protect themselves. They just are weird little grubs. So essentially, weird little small things came and ate them all off of the island. It was highly unfortunate, but due to their secret island shelter, they survived. They found 24 of them. How did they do that? Illegal hiking. Long story short, in the 60s, someone decided to climb this unclimbable super pyramid in the ocean, and they went up there, found the one bush, were like, huh, this is gross, and they sent it back to a museum. And it turns out, oh, that is what I thought it was. Ew. Then scientists went to try and find it for real, not random hikers. They had a really tough time. It's a nocturnal creature, and imagine being on this when night falls. It's like being in one of those Star Wars scenes, but worse. Sheer cliffs all around. Very long story short, chubby lobster stick bug evolved 3 times. But we could not prove chubby lobster stick bug evolved 3 times, so we needed to try. Here are the chubby lobster stick bugs. We need to prove that they're theek, but 3 different times. So we sample their mitochondrial genes. This is very common since like everything has mitochondrial genes. CO1, CO2, oxidative phosphorylation. The museum sample from ages ago matched the real live bug, so we were going to find it out. This is very complicated to explain. I promised I was a scientist once, But for the general public, we used a big computer to make a bunch of trees. And when the trees made sense, then it was a cool tree. And if the trees did make sense, it was a bad tree. So we made hundreds of thousands of trees, and we couldn't do it on our computers because it would melt them. So we sent them off to the governments. And so a shady government lab with a big computer, bigger than anything I could carry or use or afford, made lots more trees than I could ever make. So, results. Big tree lobsters are found in separate clades, though previously everyone thought there must have just been one tree lobster that had a bunch of babies and then they diverged over time. That's apparently wrong. Apparently everyone just wants to be a chubby stick. There is low support for a very early split, so not really supported that it happens as one lobster having more lobster babies, but molecular dating proved impossible. These are the three bestest trees we could find. Long story short, chubby lobster evolved 3 times. Molecular dating turned out to be really funny because the global molecular clock was negative infinity. So essentially, infinitely, none of these lobsters ever existed, which would not make any sense. The local molecular clock would not reconcile. And there was a lot of polatomy. I can't explain that here either. And fossil dating, it's really easy to eat a lobster, guys. It's really easy for like a dinosaur, a bird, a mammal, and people to eat them. So we're going off these weird egg shapes. Turns out you can't really like measure the wonkiness of an egg very good when it's a fossil. Due to the sheer size of the amount of genomics inside of this lobster, we had a really hard time. It's prohibitively large. We don't know why they diverged and then reconverged 3 different times. We're thinking shrubs make chubby lobsters. It's 4.2 gigabytes of data inside of this one tiny lobster's genome. It's hexaploidy, which meant that at some point it probably got doubled up in reproduction and then doubled up again. So it contains about like 4 more copies of its genome than we do. And if you were to type it out on paper, 1 page, convert that would be about 1,600 cubic feet of paper to hold the genome of a bug like this big. We would take less than that, actually. We would take not a half of a tractor trailer's worth of paper to read out. Here's some bloopers from trying to process this data. Here's the title of our first run. And then second, we were very confident that this was going to work. Clean data. Oh, that will help. We're going on to all caps. Take 4. Take 5. Oh, all caps. Oh, woo! Take 6 with all. Now both. Oh, take 7 without. What is this going to conformat fix? Oh man. 15 million gen. 6 hours. Eventually, it spit this out. It had a confidence of 0.005, which means it absolutely didn't make any sense. No one has seen a lobster, and nothing exists. And now you can find tree lobsters, though they're critically endangered, in your local zoos. If you're in Melbourne, sometimes in San Francisco, they had a breeding program in which a ship in 2004 braved untravelable waves to approach the island, but no one could park the boat, so they got off, jumped onto the island, climbed to the island, got 2 breeding pairs in a Ziploc like Tupperware, and then brought them to the Melbourne Zoo and were like, have babies. There's more than one bush. And they managed to do it. Now there are 9,000 of these bugs running around, and you can go see them at the zoo. That is a tree lobster. Ha ha ha. The end.
Woo! Wow, that is an extent level of nerddom that I am super curious what originated this.
I think me and Cecilia, my lab partner, went what's the world's rarest thingy? And then we gave it a Google, and it was the world's rarest bug. And everyone else was doing like possums. So we decided to do a chubby stick bug. And that was a mistake. Don't do it. Yeah. If you're in any of these biological phylogenetics classes, do something easier, like a bony fish.
Wow. Uh, question: do biologists have theories as to why some species become hexaploidic while others don't?
Well, there's a lot of reasoning behind it. A lot of the things we eat in the grocery store are hexaploidy because if you have lots of copies of a genome, you tend to make slightly bigger things. So, you know those giant strawberries you see that are like frankenberries, or
Mhm.
that they kind of look like three berries shoved into one that was forced to grow? That's a hexaploidy strawberry. If you have these little hiccups from time to time and they just make super organisms, and if you manage to survive with this mutation of having extra copies, then it sometimes works out for the best. And it didn't hurt necessarily the bugs, it just made them fatter.
So hexaploidy means fatter, like like more robust. But I mean,
How do I
I
explain
mean more
this?
like just there's more of it. So there's more of it to love.
It's more robust. So I think,
Yeah.
God, what if I'm wrong? I'm going to lecture the entirety of this lecture group on it. We have two. We are not haploidy. We are not biploidy. We are normal ploidy. We are two genome copies shoved together to make one baby. But sometimes if you get extra, that's just bonus points. Your enzymes work better because they can make more copies because there's more source material. It's hard to explain in layman's terms. Also, I owe you drinks. Let's make that the segue here, so I don't have to explain things
Yeah.
realistically.
Yeah. What are our totals? What are penalties?
It'd be 11 minutes 42, so that's surpassing 9, uh, 6, and 3, but not 12, so that's just 3 chugs.
Mm-hmm.
I will take at least 2 of them, but John, no, looks like he needs one after that, so you can take one.
I got you.
Nice. Woo! Thick genome saves lives.
Yeah, long story short, don't be a stick bug that has habitat only on one bush on one Bond villain island.
Because you will drive researchers crazy and break their computers.
Yeah, my computer was fried.
All right. Thank you. Next, we are gonna go to Jono. Let's change that here. Anytime you are ready to share your screen.
All right. So, before I really get into the meat and bones, a couple of definitions. Moonshine is, at its heart, illegal liquor. It can be found all over the world. There's pretty much almost every civilization and culture you go to, you're going to find some level of alcohol made locally in home situations where they're doing it for home use, and there's a whole variety of uses. Medicine, if you're into like tinctures and other stuff like that, that's you all use it in an alcohol base, generally speaking. Getting drunk, high enough proof, it'll disinfect a wound. Amazingly versatile stuff, and because of that, it's made all over the world. Now, for the purposes of this particular talk, we are looking at moonshine culture and where it's considered sort of traditional in the United States, and we're looking at the Appalachia region, which is this strip of mountains you can kind of see here. So it runs through East Kentucky, East Tennessee, Northern Alabama, Northern Georgia, West Carolinas, west of Virginia, the whole state of West Virginia, and southwestern Pennsylvania. For our purposes, this is Appalachia. And we're specifically going to be looking at the moonshine culture in eastern Tennessee and eastern Kentucky versus bourbon, which is made mostly in central and to a lesser degree western Kentucky, and now all over the country and even all over the world. So, yeah. And so moonshine, for our purposes, is in the Appalachian tradition, which is bare minimum 80% corn, up to 20% other things, but really for sort of the strongest traditions, you're looking at 100% corn. Bourbon is 80% can be up to similar 80% corn, but then it's also allowed various adulterants like wheat, rye. That's how you get wheated bourbon, rye whiskey, and also sugar, simply because, hey, it's cheap and I want to get that liquor content up. And so if we're going to look at class in America, we got to go kind of way back. And if we're looking at this area and here, it was originally, in terms of European settlement, was originally Scotch-Irish. And so that was the Scots that had been transported over to Northern Ireland in order to solidify British control, and then both Southern Irish and Northern Irish. They immigrated to the U.S. and were kind of immediately pushed out to the western boundaries. And we actually see this throughout U.S. expansion. There's almost always a vanguard of Scotch-Irish moving in that direction. And so they ended up in these mountains that up until the 20s and even 30s were very difficult to get through. And so one of the big divides that we see here is a cultural divide and an in-US form of cultural imperialism, where a lot of people don't understand, but Appalachia is very distinctly different from what most folks think of as Southern culture, which is more properly called Tidewater Southern culture or Dixie. And part of the reason being, when you get out to the coast throughout Virginia, Carolinas, down into southern Georgia and whatnot, and up into western Tennessee and Kentucky, that's where you had the big plantations. And especially out east, the big plantations were initially and traditionally owned and run by British descended individuals. And so that's where you had the big plantations, easy transport out to the ocean, or if you were out here to the Mississippi River and down to the Gulf, a lot of very easy transport, which is what made large batches and large production possible. You get out into the mountains, you've got a bunch of primarily independent holders. Growing corn was one of the big crops, which they got from primarily the Cherokee, if we're looking at the East Tennessee, East Kentucky region. And to give you an example of one of the bourbon recipes that you can find if you look, is you can turn about 8.5 gallons by volume of corn into 1 gallon of corn liquor. And in terms of prices, you could get the same price for a bushel of corn, which is about 50 some odd pounds, as you would get for a single gallon of corn liquor. And so for that purpose, I mean, really, that was the best economic deal for all of the farmers back up in Appalachia in the hills. It's like, I can try and bring a bushel of corn out on muleback, or I can bring like an easy 20 gallons of corn liquor out on muleback. And I mean, at that point, it's just kind of a no-brainer. And so that's one of the big divides right there. Was within Appalachia, making liquor was one, in many cases, it was the only way that you were going to put food on the table. And, you could grow some things, but you couldn't grow sugar. You couldn't mine and process copper on your own, a bunch of other stuff. And so they needed that cash, that capital in order to get by. And then also, like I said, there's the medicinal value as well, where if you wanted to make any kind of tinctures, disinfectant, you're brewing shine. Whereas if you head out to bourbon country, so like one of the oldest names in bourbon is Evan Williams. Some of y'all may have seen it in the stores. If not, I do recommend it. It's a great shelf bourbon. But that was on the banks of the, I want to say, Little Tennessee River, which they could pop right on out to the Mississippi. And from there, you get all through the Midwest, take it down to the Gulf, bring it back around east, however you wanted to do it. And because of that, and the name that has it, Evan Williams, he was himself a pastor, which back in those days was actually a high money, high respect position, especially when you moved out into sort of the flatlands, into the more heavily populated areas. If we look back through Revolutionary and Civil War era history, preachers played a huge role in it, were very well respected, were national celebrities in some cases. And so that's where your bourbon comes from. And if we go ahead and zoom in the map, we can see, here's our modern map, but most of the bourbon is concentrated nowadays around Lexington and Louisville, sort of in this general area, which is, if we zoom back out, you can see the mountains here, but then you can see we're outside of the mountains here, and then the Mississippi River runs from up here in Minnesota on down through here. And so, and Lexington and Louisville being the capital, bourbon came up in a place of affluence, and it was about big production, big money, and was primarily about making money, which is kind of the overall narrative. Even if we looked at it today, you use liquor to get drunk, you use it to make cocktails, you use it to drink and whatnot, which is a huge difference from the culture of Appalachian moonshine, where liquor was about putting food on the table, having medicine to give your children and your family, and then also to get drunk and whatnot. But it was very much a multi-purpose and just inextricable part of the culture there. And so then what we see is during and that was actually some of the sources of one of the first insurrections that the United States ever faced was up here in southern Pennsylvania. It was the Whiskey Rebellion, where federal government tried to impose an excise tax on liquor. And, in New England and such, major port towns, liquor was something that you drank. But out here, like I said, it was a part of life and a method of survival. And so southeastern Pennsylvania, there was a legit insurrection. Farmers took arms, they kicked out the tax collectors, and eventually President Washington raised about 13,000 militiamen from New Jersey, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania to try and go back in there and put those farmers down. The farmers, upon hearing that 13,000 soldiers led by General Washington were coming, they just kind of faded into the background. But it showed that the federal government could enforce its will, but it also led to the removal of that excise tax, because they're just like, maybe we shouldn't antagonize these people further. And then through Civil War times, it was actually made illegal in the Confederacy because they wanted all the grain to go towards food. But then after Civil War times, that was removed again because it was a lifeline for the mountain folk, and they gave no fucks. and then now any talk about class in America has to involve people of color and women. There's no way around it. And that's where some of this stuff gets really interesting, where people of color, there were, throughout Appalachia region, tons of people of color and their communities. Part of it is because it was so just distant from the Tidewater and the federal authorities and the Fugitive Slave Act and all this other stuff. You could go up into the hills and hide out. And if you knew how to take care of yourself and your family, then you could be fine back there and actually during the Cherokee removal under Jackson's time, a lot of the Cherokee went out and hid amongst the mountain folk, because out there it's just like, well, if you're family, and fuck anybody else. And that's actually, today you see there's the Eastern Band of Cherokee and the Western Band of Cherokee. Part of it is the Eastern Band of Cherokee, they were able to go and hide out amongst the mountain folk there. And that is, and so, but when we're looking now at the history, and you may have seen like some of the new moonshines, like the authentic moonshines in liquor stores and whatnot. There's a distillery in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, that is the first legal moonshine distillery ever, that puts out a whole bunch of different flavors, all this other stuff. And it's, run by some white folk. And you see this erasure of people of color from that history, because they were living out in the same region. They adopted much of the same culture, and they had all the same reasons for making moonshine, but they're not spoken about. And with women, it's even more difficult for me to find good information on them up until the Prohibition era, because then there were the women bootleggers, and bootlegger is different from moonshiner. Bootleggers, it started up during the Prohibition era, and it was very much about making that money. Moonshiners, it was much more about the culture. During Prohibition era, the two came together, but then the emphasis on profit actually moved it away from traditional moonshining. And even moonshine itself was actually, that term started out back over in Britain, and it was adopted in Appalachia, because the story, and it's a large part truth, is that you made this liquor by the light of the moon. It was moonshine because you did it at night, so nosy neighbors and the federal revenuers didn't come get you. But yeah, so people of color, they have all the same cultural elements in that region, but they're non-existent for the most part. And there's a great there's a good academic article on it that I'll give you reference on later if you want to look that up. And then women, like I said, even less so. It wasn't until Prohibition era that we start hearing about women bootleggers, but not moonshiners. Because like I said, there is a difference. And that whole moonshine culture is, up until very recently, is talked down on. If you're of a certain age, you might remember newspaper comics, and there was one called Snuffy Smith, where it was basically, making humor off of the idea of lazy, inbred, hillbilly moonshiners. And it wasn't up until I think the Gatlinburg distillery opened up in 2016, thereabouts, that all of a sudden, oh, moonshine is cool, we want to look into it, and we're only going to talk about the white folk doing moonshine. And we're only going to talk about people like Popcorn Sutton, who, respect, man was one of the last moonshiners, and he did it till the day he died, but he's also a white guy. We don't know about the people of color that were and still are shiners. We don't know about the women. We can look way, way back, and there's mention of women as moonshiners because it was medicinal. And that was one of the areas where women were expected to maintain, is, taking care of the family, finding the curatives, making the tinctures and the herbs and such. And so they had to shine. But even then, moonshine as a medicinal, it can't exist by the federal government, because medicine comes from doctors who are cis white males and live in the big cities and that sort of thing. It wasn't accepted, which is the ongoing theme we see. Bourbon made itself, and to this day brands itself as a consumable. This is for bars, this is for drinking. It's, generally speaking, 40%. The cask strength, you'll get up to like 48%, thereabouts. Moonshine, by tradition, never less than 50%. If it's less than 50, it ain't proper shine. And it's made by corn. And 50%, slightly above that, that's where you get into disinfectant. You make medicine at, you can use it for medicine. And the pure corn, again, that harkens back to the old traditions of this is how we get our corn to market. There were no roads, there were no railroads coming through. So that right there is kind of, to me, the crux of the cultural and class struggle, is the fact that you've got bourbon out there, which was started by affluent individuals and has now been consolidated until you've got like 7 different bourbon varieties: Pappy Van Winkle, Buffalo Trace, American Eagle, and a couple others, all come out of the same distillery. They're just branded different. Whereas moonshine, even to this day, I would get moonshine from so-and-so, and they had their own way of doing it. My buddy and his dad, who would do an occasional batch, they had their own way of doing it. It's much more individual, and it's much more, again, you get it through community. They don't advertise, but everybody knows who makes what and what it's good for. And that is that, again, that cultural divide where, and we see this also in other settings, like with people of color and immigrant families, where gardening was just a thing that you had to do. That was how you made ends meet. That was how you got your food and your fresh vegetables and such. And now gardening is just a cool thing that a lot of people do. And yeah, it's a very positive thing and a good thing. But in the current kind of modern conversation, they don't talk about the roots, and they don't respect the people that have kept this tradition alive throughout the years in the United States. It's one of those things that was just talked down upon and looked down upon up until very recently. Same with shine, where it hasn't been until it's become the cool artisanal thing. And there's another good article on the whitewashing of artisanal food and drinks that I'll provide a reference for at the end of this. And so that, again, to kind of bring it back, is moonshine historically was a multi-use way for families to get by. It served a whole bunch of different purposes. Being drunk was only one of them, and even then, not for every family. My grandfather on my dad's side, he was a Baptist minister of the circuit riding variety. He'd go out and hit the different churches that couldn't afford a full-time minister, and he was a teetotaler. He recognized, like, locally done distilled liquor, you need it for medicine, that sort of thing, fine, but you don't drink it. And I asked my dad about this one time, like, look, Jesus's first miracle was turning water into wine. How is it that grandpa can't be okay with alcohol? And my dad was like, well, grandpa, he saw every day the ruin that alcoholism brought into a community. And so that's the thing, is even within Appalachia and moonshining culture, there are people who don't hold with drinking alcohol for entertainment because they see that. And then if you look back amongst a lot of the old moonshiners, they, the stories they tell, they're like, I wouldn't sell to no damn drunkard. Everybody knew who they were. Because again, moonshine wasn't just about the drink, it was about this resource for the community. Whereas, again, if we look at bourbon, Kentucky has now the Bourbon Trail, which is this official route of distilleries you can take, and you can do samplings and all that sort of stuff. It's very much a branding and commercial and branding conscious thing. And that is, that is the difference between our moneyed class and the people who have to find the labor, the people who have to find ways to get by and survive without capital. And I imagine I've gone on for a fair bit. So I'm going to move us over to my list of resources. Oops. Here we are. And these are some of the spots that I have drawn from. So Foxfire is here it is. It was a collection of stories and such about Appalachian living, started by a teacher and his students as a way to collect the history before it was gone. And now it's this massive multi-volume set. So if you're interested in just learning more about life in that culture and that sort of thing, highly recommend it. Lies, my teacher, told me, speaking as a teacher who teaches history, this shit is fantastic. And part of what it goes into is class struggle in America and how it is just this forbidden subject, and why and who it advantages it. And then Lauren Michael Jackson did this really nice article on the whitewashing essentially of craft culture and artisanal culture. And then Mika Brand did a nice academic article, which is behind a paywall, and I could go on a whole rant about that. But it is a solid article about people of color and the moonshining tradition and that, and moreover, how that's transmitted. It's very much about stories that just kick into normal conversation. It's not about like interviews and a chronological order. It's about the transmission of culture and that sort of thing. And then if you're interested in the historical underpinnings of Appalachian culture, our Southern Highlanders is considered sort of one of the seminal works on Appalachian culture. And it was written back, I want to say the 30s or so, by Horace Kephart, who he went and just traveled amongst them. It's very much an ethnography in that respect, where he just wrote about the stuff he saw, people he talked to, all that sort of thing. And so to me, it offers a really good glimpse into that culture and talks more about it. So yeah, if you're interested in further research, definitely check these out. And like I said, man, it's a very interesting lens on here in the United States, a very American divide between people who have the capital, and for them the product is simply about gaining capital, and people for whom the product is about their culture and their community and taking care of their culture and community.
All right. That was really good. I wish I had a history teacher that would teach me about stuff like this, including class divides. But I must unfortunately give you the verdict as to how many healthy chugs you must take, which is a very decent amount. So that'll be surpassing 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, and 21. I hope that you asked some people to help you out here.
Well, thankfully, I have 2 jars with me. So here goes.
That better not be moonshine.
Oh my good Lord.
Woo! Wow.
No, so it's not shine. I can get all my friends that do that are back in Tennessee. This is bourbon that my partner has infused with blackberries specifically, that our friend Erin, she did and kind of kicked down her procedure to us. And I'm definitely doing whiskey with a water back.
Here, let me at least take one.
You said 21 minutes, so I mean, that sounds like about 6-ish drinks to me. So, like I said, 2 jars. I'm not emptying this one though.
I need to be back, and I need to actually get alcohol in front of me because I feel like I ought to drink proper alcohol after that lecture. I'll be right back.
So,
I'll take one for you just to share in the love.
Yeah, please don't chug a jar of bourbon.
I don't put hair on your chest, that's for damn sure.
So for moonshine,
really nice too.
Would it be everything that is illegal made, like alcohol made illegally? Because like when I was in Laos, we had Lao Lao, which is made from sticky rice. Would that be considered moonshine?
So for me personally, it is very much about the illegality of it it's part of the cachet, and to a degree, here in the United States at least, that is for me an inextricable part of it. But then the heart of it for me is the cultural underpinnings. Is this a thing that has come up in the culture that is a intertwined with the cultural rituals, the history, the stories? Does it have that vibrancy and that life to it, where it's not just this thing that has become a matter of gaining capital, but it's a matter of values and having practical use within the culture? That's why I said, like, moonshine, never less than 50%. Because if it's less than that, it's no good medicinally. You can't use it to disinfect shit. You can't use it to clean, nothing like that. And is it something that is made within the culture, where there's a tradition and history of it because it's a necessity of the culture. And it's made, like you said, in Laos, Lao Lao, made with sticky rice because that's what's available. In Tennessee, corn, because that's what's available. And that was how they put, money on, that's how they put food on the table and, got cloth to clothe their family. So that for me it's about the culture around it and the fact that it's not purely about gaining capital, but it's about cultural survival and continuation.
Okay. Yeah.
We have a question in the chat here from Dr. DJ Curley. Question. I know there are some dry counties in the vicinity of Louisville and Lexington Bourbon Country. Any thoughts about how that, dry counties or more on temperance movements in general, plays into this cultural history that you shared?
Oh God, yes. So I mean, with the whole Prohibition era really changed the face of Appalachian moonshining, and it moved it from a uniquely cultural thing and brought in a strong element of not just profit but criminality, where in originally, and you can hear this in accounts where it would just, and especially Southern Highlanders goes over this, is great, where if a moonshiner was caught, there was no violence. They're just like, well, all right, you done caught me. Sheriff wouldn't even bring him in. Sheriff would just say, all right, you need to show up at the courthouse at X time, and the moonshiner would be there. It was just expected. If you didn't show up, then your word was no good. And in a world where rep is everything, if your word's no good, your liquor's no good, and so fuck you for playing. Whereas when Prohibition came about, it was just about making that money. I mean, Christ, Capone made, at the time, $21 million a year off of distribution. And so previously it was, you'd have like 10, 20, 30 gallon stills. When Prohibition came out, you were doing 100, 200 gallon stills, and you didn't care what you were using or what part of the liquor you were using. Traditionally, the first bits of liquor that are spit out have a lot of the real foul shit in them, a lot of the nasty chemicals that will do lasting damage. And you throw that shit away. Even if it is, half a gallon of liquor, you still throw it away because it's no good. Same with the last end of it. You throw that away too. Once it became a matter of profit, then hell no, keep that shit. We'll just adulterate it with water and sell it. Money's money. So yeah, Prohibition really changed the face of it. And to my mind, it's part of the reason why today you find a lot of the traditional skills and art of moonshining have by and large died out. I'm sorry, this really is an area of hyper focus for me.
No, it's good. I love when people nerd out passionately about the subjects that they're here to talk about. So thank you for doing that. All right, so if we're ready for our next lecture, Trevor, I believe you are on. When you're ready,
Yeah.
share your screen.
Okay. Let me pop this up.
Reset that timer for you so it's not a super penalty.
Alrighty, let's get into some archaeological mysteries and how they're really not all that mysterious. First of all, there's a lot of what people call archaeological mysteries out in the world. We have the pyramids, we have Stonehenge, we have where did the Mayans go, or how did people get to America? And we have some pretty crazy theories about stuff like that. We have the lost tribe of Israel walking across the Atlantic Ocean to build the mounds in, southeastern United States because naturally they were giants. That was, a viable archaeological theory for some time. Instead, we could go with, other things that people like, such as time travelers. And I'm going to be really honest here. It's not going to be time travel. Physicists have debates on it. Some say like, oh no, time travel is possible, and others are like, well, everything shuts down after the speed of light, so it's not possible, and they have no decision really on that. But so it's not time travelers. It's never time travelers. You have things like Atlantis and Lemuria and Mu, that are all these sunken civilizations of advanced technology that, came from somewhere. I mean, no one really says anything about that. But like um, like his republic, Atlantis was just made up from, by Plato to make a point. He was having a philosophical debate and was trying to prove something, and that's what the republic is, and that was what Atlantis was. And then we have the last option, which everyone loves, and that's aliens. And it's not aliens. It simply is not aliens. It's never ever aliens. It really isn't. And honestly, the ancient area alien theory is a racist theory, because clearly the savages outside of Europe couldn't have actually done any of this, so they had to have help. And honestly, it could only have been aliens. But it's not. But then, who could have possibly have done this? It is very much a mystery, or not. It's people. People did these things. That's how that works. People are amazingly innovative. They're creative, inventive. I know that's kind of also innovative, but and most importantly, they're very, very stubborn. If they want to do something, they will get it done. We see that with all sorts of things. So like that's where all these mysteries really are. That's who did them. That's how they were made. But let's go into a couple of specific ones. Stonehenge. Everyone loves Stonehenge. Big rocks. That's a common thing, actually. The big rocks that are stacked up someplace, and people are like, "How did they get here? How did they shape them up here and get them here?" And they drag them. It's usually that simple. They put them on logs and they just rolled them 50, 60, 70 miles. A lot of that is done in societies that have a big like complex chiefdom sort of technology, where they have monumental architecture, usually with some level of agricultural or something like that, but not always. Just something where they could collect resources to basically pay people, and most of that payment was in food. You have the pyramids, was not really built by slaves. Slaves were used, but it wasn't exclusively them. There's a lot of people that were just paid in bread and beer, and that's how they built them. Also, ironically, they just dragged the rocks up. So that's where Stonehenge is. Stonehenge is also unique in that the rocks, or the lintels as they're called, on the top of them are mortar and tenon on there, which means it's just like woodworking. They put a groove and made a notch, and they fit them in there so they wouldn't fall off. And of course, they made those by hitting it with other rocks. Takes some time, but like I said, people are really, really stubborn. We have the Nazca lines. These are all, they're from the Incans. They're down in South America. They're these giant geoglyphs, which are basically just large geographic symbols that are on the ground. You can, people have always been like, oh, they made these because they're trying to talk to the gods above, or in some people to the aliens above, which again, not. But we also have things where a lot of cultures out in the New World were, had a 3-layer sort of spiritual world. You had the upper world, you had the middle world, and you had the lower world. And the middle world, which is ours, is where people live, and it's kind of a phase through space. So these could easily have just been for any deities they had above or deities they had below, which also became very confusing for a lot of the missionization attempts taken out when people are talking, when the priests and colonizers are coming in and talking about the God above, and the people are like, well, that's fucking crazy because that's where the demons live. God's down below. But these were made by walking. They literally walked, and they brushed some some rocks out of the way, and then they walked some more, and they brushed some rocks out of the way, and they continued the concept to make these huge things. Again, not really that mysterious. And then we have Easter Island or Rapa Nui and the Moai, which are those big stone heads that everyone loves. And like I started with Stonehenge, how did they get these giant, big, huge, heavy rocks across the island where the quarries were, miles and miles away? And people are like, there's no way. They had to have help. It had to be the 13th tribe of Israel walked over through the Pacific as well, or aliens came down and dug it and placed them. And whenever they asked the local people, the people said they walked there, and they were like, oh, there's just crazy people. They didn't walk there. That's just them being savages and not knowing the word of God and crap like that. And then it turns out that they walked there. All these these giant sculptures had rounded bottoms, and if you can see right around the forehead, there's this big large forehead right there. And if you get a rope around that, and then have some people on one side of the rope and other people on the other side of the rope, and you pull on it back and forth, these actually walk across the ground. And archaeologists have recreated this and done it over and over again. And that's where, if you just sometimes listen to the indigenous people of the area, they'll tell you exactly how things were done and where they came from and all that stuff. And then we have a few people's favorite, the Antikythera mechanism, which is this complex geared mechanism. And it is complex in that there's a lot of gears, but people talk about it being the first analog computer, and that clearly there's no technology like that around, and we don't know what it does or what it could have done, and we've never found anything like this. So what could it be? Probably dropped here by aliens. Aliens come off a lot with these mysteries, and really, like, gears had been around for several hundred years at this point. You have Archimedes, who built huge, claws and trebuchets. And it turns out that these are just, it's a celestial, clock sort of. You find out, you twist the knob, it turns around, and it tells you, oh, the sun's going to be here, or this Venus is going to rise at this point. And it's, it's really, really simple. And when you put it all together, all the information on there is 20,000 or 20 BC, 20 BCE actually, since we like to prefer before current era as opposed to before Christ. So it's not really a mystery. So like that's really, honestly, it's just people. People do things, and it's really easy for them to do things. There's all sorts of things that come out there. You have Machu Picchu, something that comes up often because the rocks that are used to build it are just put together so finely that you can't even fit a knife blade before it. And it's like, well, yeah, if you take a rock and you take another rock and you sand that rock enough and you put it together and you're like, oh, that's not quite right, and you sand it some more, eventually it's going to be really, really close. You just take some time. Whether they want to do that or not, that's a different story. They may be forced to, or it may pay them time, and maybe they really did this because they were getting paid by the hour, and they're like, we're going to make this really, really good because it's going to take a really, really long time, and we're going to get a lot of booze. So like there's that. There are actual archaeological mysteries out there, and that's mainly just because we don't actually know quite yet what they are. Those things are like the Mayans and how they were, what happened to their society, why did it collapse when it did, and a lot of that looks like it's climate change and deforestation causing issues with farming and water flow, which then screwed up their entire economic system, which then led on to their social system. And since they had already had problems with other local groups, that just kind of all came together to make that. But the impetus was climate change. Interestingly enough, Angkor Wat also supposedly climate change. There was a large drought for a long time because they were deforesting too much. So that kind of goes into, today there's a lot of climate change and probably things might collapse, and who knows, we might know who built the skyscrapers. It's probably was going to be aliens. So that's what I got.
Okay, that was a way to end a lecture. That was awesome.
No, we're doomed.
We're so doomed.
We're so doomed. Let me give you your time before we forget. So it's 11:51, so that will be surpassing 3, 6, and 9 for at least 3.
Okay.
And then I might, maybe, take a bonus 4th for a possible disclaimer, but I'm gonna leave it up to you because I wasn't sure.
What was the disclaimer?
I don't remember anymore. I've had too much Klingon bloodline.
I'll take it. My disclaimer is I'm just one archaeologist, and I don't know all of human history. There's a lot of it. I don't even know all the human history of my specific specialization because there's a lot of that. But yeah.
I will have a drink, even though it's not wine and I have to present next.
Perfect.
My God, that was all the lectures I've listened to today are very, very cool.
I'm looking forward to yours. I love Golden Girls.
Hey, yeah. Golden Girls are great.
Golden Girls, huh?
I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
So, if so much stuff is caused due to climate change, and it might be like aliens built the skyscrapers, what do you think will be the generic ritual objects of our society? So I think that whenever we find a random thing we don't know what it is, they tend to be like, this is a ritual object.
Oh,
what do you think
absolutely.
Our stuff will be?
I mean, we absolutely do. As archaeologists, there's a lot of things we don't know, and we'll find something and we're like, oh, it's ritual. It's a running joke actually in the archaeology community of like, this ritual. Sometimes ritual, sometimes not. But for these areas, I think for us, it's really hard to say now. A lot of things have moved on, and we've kind of moved past. Like, I would have said it would have been TVs, and there's actually a fantastic book called Motel of the Mysteries, which is a archaeological story that is about a future civilization that finds the lost great civilization of USA, which is the USA, and they find a motel, and they talk about like the ritual system of the TV, or the box, the speaking box, or the God box, as I think they mentioned it in there. But they also have like toilets. I can definitely see toilets being a ritual object. So, yeah, even
the
toilet.
Magic chair. Woo!
Exactly. We know. I mean, we call it the ivory throne. There's all sorts praying to the porcelain goddess. Like, we have all this stuff written down about that. So, it kind of fits.
Oh, no.
I feel like there are a lot of post-apocalyptic games and LARPs that are dedicated to this miscommunication, and it's kind of amazing.
I mean, it's a lot of fun to play with. Especially with post-apocalyptic LARPs like A47, if you're like building this world about what happens after the world, and you don't know what happened, then you don't really have like any idea about what was before. So you don't know what any of these things are. And you see that throughout, human history with various, groups praying and building up, rituals and societies and religions around previous civilizations and what was left behind, because there's not anything left. So it could go, that's where you get to really explore into our future. But you can also look about what those things say about who we are now, that these are the things that are left behind. These are the things that people attribute to our rituals or our civilization. And like smartphones are going to might be that. I also see guns being a lot of that, since there's a lot of guns around.
Mm,
And what does that say about who we are?
wow. All of the deep questions.
Yeah.
That
This
was
is
great.
fantastic.
No.
All right. So I guess it's time for my lecture. And if anything looks askew when you're seeing or hearing things, please let me know since I'm giving a presentation but cannot observe what I am doing. Yeah, just let me know. But I think I have this covered. Um, so with that, I am going to present deconstructing the production design of the Golden Girls Kitchen. So, the Golden Girls Kitchen is one of the most famous kitchens in television history. It is considered one of the top 10 most recognizable kitchens on TV, according to TV Guide, if you know what that is. The ladies tell stories from their past at the breakfast table or eat cheesecake to solve a problem. So this location is very central to the whole show. But this quintessential 1980s set was produced for a multi-camera show at the Sunset Gower Studios in Hollywood, California, despite that the setting is in Miami. So, how did this particular show start? Well, it started because of another show, Miami Vice. So, believe it or not, the same executives that came up with Miami Vice came up for the basic concept of the show. The idea was going to be senior citizens that lived in Florida, and it was a joke concept, and they called it Miami Nice. That was the name of the concept. Uh, so the idea was that it was putzed around, but it wasn't until a woman named Susan Harris, another writer on another TV show called Soap, was about to retire. The original concept was the execs wanted women in their 40s because they thought that was old, and Susan Harris decided to move the age range from the 40s to the 60s and made them all women. They got very The end result was that very prominent actresses from the 1980s were auditioning because there just wasn't a lot of roles written on TV for women in their 60s, believe it or not. However, the writing on the pilot was so good that the executives kept Susan's vision. So Susan Harris is the reason why Golden Girls is the way it is, and she even cites that women just have a different perspective than men do when it comes to comedy. So a lot of what you see in Golden Girls is written a lot from her perspective as she became one of the executives on the show. Susan Harris had a rule for writing comedy, and that is if an actor cold reads a line and didn't get why it was funny, they just threw it out. So the result is that the comedy was very tight, but even if the references were very 80s, so you'll hear names like Jimmy Swaggart, Jessica Hahn, MCI, Gary Hart, Donna Rice, Klaus von Bülow, which were all huge things and names in the 1980s, it's because everyone at the time got it. So, we're going to compare what kitchens in Miami were like in 1985 compared to 2021 or 2020 when we kind of look at what kitchens are composed of. So, you saw a lot of yellow pattern wallpaper because wallpaper was very popular at that time, and wooden cabinets decorate the kitchen walls. So, there was a lot of light yellow and light wood bringing brightness to the kitchen without having to be white like in current kitchens. So in a lot of kitchens a few years ago, it was all about the all white kitchen. Now it's all about the colored kitchen. But the reason why white kitchens were a thing was because it wasn't standard until the 1950s, and that was because of Upton Sinclair, The Jungle, that exposed problematic practices in butcheries. So the white kitchen was supposed to show and expose dirt and germs easily, and so for longest time, white kitchens were very popular. They were recently popular within the past 5 years because they were supposed to promote a clean aesthetic. However, within the past few years, they realized white is very boring and very sterile and looks like hospitals. And now we currently have more colored kitchens, even two-tone kitchens in 2020s. Um, the kitchen yellow of the 1980s was supposed to reflect the popularity of the beach aesthetic in Miami, which is a lot of yellows, seafoam green, peaches, pinks. So if you remember a lot of the 80s being very pastel colored, that was very reflected in these kitchens. But also a lot of plant life, a lot of palm trees, and also yellow is a bright, happy color, evoking sunshine because we're in sunny Miami. On the outside of or on the tops and the outside of the kitchen, you will see a lot of copper ceramic cookware like cake molds, pans, and bakery and baking tins. Um, and they were usually above the upper cabinets. So you can see in this screenshot, you'll see a lot of upper cabinets, and it's because the walls only go up so far, but you needed something to decorate it. So whenever you had like wide shots, you were able to still have the kitchen scenery without seeing some of the lights and the wires that were above or the mics. The exterior of the kitchen of the cabinet doors were a natural wood grain with knots with raised panels on the upper cabinets. And the base cabinets, so the lower cabinets, have a drawer panel and door with no drawer banks. So if you look at where the sink was going to be, those are like a false panel in order to hide the double basin silver kitchen sink. So in order to keep the whole cabinetry and the whole kitchen uniform looking. And however, wood grain with knots was very popular in the 1970s. It happened to carry over into this set, which is 1980s, and it makes sense because this house was very lived in. Because if it was a younger group living here, you would see a lot more bright pastels, neons, grays, and silvers in order for the neon and bright colors to pop out. But because it's an older group, you're going to have the motifs from the 70s carry over because people who were investing into those motifs, like if you're going to redecorate kitchen cabinets, you were not going to do it every 3 years. It was going to be something that you were going to model or remodel once, and then if you had to remodel it again, it would be like 20 or 30 years. So that's why you see a slightly 70s look to this particular production set. So the countertop surface, if you look on this particular thing, you'll notice that it's the same coloration as the cabinets, which was very, very unusual. When we think of countertops, we think maybe white countertops or a different color countertop. The fact that they actually look the same is very odd to us. And again, it's the whole uniformity. It's a belief that everything needs to be uniform in the 1980s because that was you wanted everything to match. So everything looking uniform within your furniture was a trend, but that also included your appliances. So in this scene here, you have the refrigerator being faux wood paneling to relatively match the kitchen, even though it has the double ice tray dispenser on it, because again, you wanted your refrigerator to match the rest of your kitchen. Nowadays, we want our refrigerators to kind of stick out so we could find them in the dark, but it was a thing to just make sure that everything matched. And I say relatively because even though it's wood paneling, obviously it was not made of wood, it just had the appearance of wood. The refrigerators were usually magnetic because you could have at least magnets on their surfaces. So according to various production design notes on the show, the breakfast table that you see in this shot was originally reflective. And the big problem was that on a set, when you have a lot of lights, studio lights that are on the that are above, reflecting on this glass table, it would produce a large glare on the camera. But glass tables used to be very popular in the 80s. So the only way to fix that was to throw a tablecloth over it. So it was never intended. You generally don't have tablecloths for breakfast nook tables. It's almost unheard of. They did it as a production design. However, these it ended up being so signature to the point where whenever the tablecloth clashed with one of the ladies' outfits, the studio would actually get letters about that. So the tablecloths now changed almost every episode, and because they had like 50 or 60 in the back, and they just pull a random tablecloth out, and they would just decorate it that way. Um, um, Also, in the house, you notice that there was actually no dining room, because the kitchen is considered both dining and cooking. Part of it was that if you actually had a dining room, there would actually be no setting. There was no reason to have a dining room, so they just took it out and had a breakfast nook. The strange part about the breakfast nook is that normally you would have this next to a window in most places. Here, it's just done in lieu of a dining room table because they just needed a place for everyone to sit down. Um, but they just did still need to keep it stylish. So in order to do that, there were three Chippendale dining chairs, since Chippendale furniture was popular at the time with the bamboo back frame. A lot of bamboo stuff was very popular in the 80s. And it also matches all of the bamboo furniture in the other rooms of the house, especially the living room. There was a lot of bamboo in that. And if you look at Sophia's purse, it was also made of bamboo. It was a very popular texture in the 80s. Um, in this particular shot, you see that Sophia is actually on a uh, kitchen rolling cart that serves as a work table and another seating area. And that's partly because originally, when they thought of four ladies sitting down to a small table, they thought that maybe they could probably shoot all four ladies at the same table, but it just did not work with the camera's perspective that they had. They thought that, well, Sophia is small enough that maybe you would see the back of Sophia because she's so short, and her character wouldn't care that her back was to the camera. However, it just didn't look good. So in order for all four ladies to be on this one set, you had three ladies at this one small table, and you had someone for whatever reason on the other side of the table. So we always had these large shots which included all four ladies, but never were all four ladies ever sitting at the table. It was always three ladies and one sitting, or three ladies and someone was cooking, someone was on the phone, someone was elsewhere. In order to keep this scene moving and look more dynamic. Um, let's see. Also, let's kind of move to something else that's kind of important here. And this, we introduce the concept of the golden work triangle when it comes to kitchen layouts. There is a philosophy in how you're supposed to lay out a kitchen, and that is the three main points of your kitchen are supposed to be the refrigerator, the oven, and the sink. And you want to keep your space clear, and that is the most efficient way to have a kitchen. And it's to the point where real estate agents mark it as a negative when this work triangle is not observed, because most people want a spacious kitchen. But the interesting part is that in production design, that on most sets, most productions don't really care about this, because you don't really feature a sink unless comedy happens because of a broken sink and water spilling everywhere. And the refrigerator is usually shown from the side, like in most sitcoms, and the oven is often shown from the side because you're trying to pull out whatever turkey or whatever cake is coming from it. However, the Golden Girls kitchen is very different because you have a front facing kitchen, and it's specifically done because you're trying to face camera in order to get that interaction to happen. Cooking is a very central part of very much many of the ladies' lives. Um, so they had to develop an island kitchen, which at the time was not very common in the 80s. It was done specifically, and it's not that they didn't exist, it just didn't make sense. A lot of these kitchens were usually along the side where you would plug either power or gas lines next to the kitchen. So an independent standing kitchen was just kind of odd. but they did it for production reasons because it just looked more attractive to be able to see whatever Sophia or Rose was cooking on their kitchen, and they just happened to face camera. Um, um, the so this particular kitchen island is with a 4-coil white range top. There's a wing extension at the side if the cook needed more counter space. So what they would do is that particular island space is very, very small. So if they just needed an extra wing, they just lifted the side and they had more counter space. And the coil ranges means that this range is electric rather than gas, because in the 1980s, again, island stovetops were not common. It's not uncommon for a kitchen to have 2 islands in 1985, although in 2020, this is actually a current trend. Now, if we move to the doorways, so there are 2 doorways into this particular kitchen. The most visible one is the one that's swinging with a door with a metal plate, similar to a restaurant kitchen door. There's no knob, and that's pretty common in a lot of different kitchens. The kitchen doesn't generally need a door. We just kind of have a dividing space. But also it creates comment moments, on either like listening to one side or pretending not to hear what's in the other room. Next to this door is a white baker's rack that holds jars and bowls, and this is purely for set decoration since no one interacts with this area and it just fills up with space. There is an implied second door behind the pale yellow touch-tone corded phone, which leads to the garage. And the long curly cord is meant to be long enough to be used anywhere in the kitchen. So this allows an actress to go pretty much anywhere within that kitchen without feeling that they have to be stuck to the one area. But if you look at the layout, it actually makes no sense if you consider the whole entirety of the house. Because there are 2 doors. Again, one goes to the living room, but supposedly the back door near the phone is supposed to go out to the garage. However, physically, the bedrooms are supposed to be where the ladies are going to whenever you look logistically on the set. So it doesn't make sense, but that is how production designs work. There are a couple of other things to note. When it comes to staging things, if you look at the very bottom of this island kitchen, you will see a little bit of piping, and that's because again the gas or the power is actually supposed to go to the kitchen top to the island kitchen. However, if you notice, it's so close to the cabinetry that you actually cannot open those cabinets. So it actually makes no sense to do it there. Again, it's a production design flaw. So those cabinets completely useless and are just face only. However, the thing in the circle is not a penis mold, as everyone thinks it is. It is actually a lobster cake pan mold because lobsters are popular in Miami. You can fish for lobster there. There's this running idea that trolls have put a penis there, but it's just a cake mold, just to show up that, just to show that ladies can cook. But also, there's lots of kitchenware storage that was popular in the 1980s. In the 1980s, the idea of having kitchenware everywhere was popular. A lot of the pot racks that are above your head that you see happened in the 1980s. They were to show off a wealthy kitchen or chef's kitchen, and they entertained that idea on this production set. However, it would actually look too messy on this set, and it would also be suspended underneath the studio lights, causing it a lot of glare, so they just nixed the idea. So, before we end this, this really intensive look into the Golden Girls kitchen, there is one other piece of trivia that I want to show off, and that is the exterior of the Golden Girls house. So this is what the exterior. First of all, it's a real house that you see in those frames, and is with a real address. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You could look it up. You could find it. It's in the neighborhood of Brentwood, which is a very wealthy upscale area. So this is the outside as it looks in 2020. And it's interesting because people don't exactly know what's on the inside, but the inside is very fascinating. This is a custom-built house made with Japanese and Hawaiian elements within the structure. It was owned by the same people from 1955. So this is a real rarity. It looks really, it's really beautiful. Again, very custom made, and it only went on sale in 2020 when they decided to put it on the market. The asking price was 2,999,999 because they didn't want to be those people. But again, it was a custom made house. The final price was $4 million. Why? Because it was the motherfucking Golden Girls house. And there we go. There we go. The Golden Girls. And let's see. Oh, let me just take this off here. And that is my presentation on the Golden Girls. When I said I nerded out, I meant like I went into every single detail and why it was there.
Wow.
Beautiful. Thank you.
That was some deep lore.
I'm really happy about Miami Nice. That's what I'm really happy about.
Yep.
Miami Nice.
Miami Nice is the original concept of the Golden Girls.
I was so ready for it to be a direct spin-off. I was like waiting for the tie-in. Like Betty White was like a background drug dealer number 2, and that's how it like directly tied in. But I guess not. Oh, it looks like on
I would
Twitch,
totally believe that.
it's still stuck on the house.
Betty White as thug number 2. Yes. Yeah.
Hey, Betty White's pretty badass when it comes to that.
That's true. She is pretty baller, so
I can definitely see her as being Crockett's, maybe Tubbs. No, definitely Tubbs' mom. See
Tubbs'
that.
mom. All right, how much do I have to drink?
So that is going to be a solid 19 minutes and 50 seconds. So
Whoa!
that will
Okay.
be a 3, a 6, a 9, a 12, a 15, and an 18 for at least 6 healthy chugs as you see fit or need help with.
Okay, I will drink 2. One of them being alcohol, one of them being water, one of them being coffee, and one of them
With
being
John No finishing off the bourbon.
nice.
And then on to the beer.
Oh. 1. 2.
'That better be the water.
It's water. 3.
Gotta hydrate.
Gotta hydrate.
Hydrate or dihydrate.
Hydrate or dihydrate.
We have a question in the chat for you.
All right. What was it about the Golden Girls that originally drew you? So, my mom was one of those. I'm very, very blessed to have a very unconventional Filipino mom. Very unconventional. She was. We didn't go to church. That was like a mom decision. She was considered the life of the party of any place that she went to. She was the one that occasionally will get other people to blush by telling the occasional dirty joke. She is the type of mom that when we went to a wedding and there were protesters outside that that basically protested no gay marriage, which was really weird because it was a straight marriage, but they were out there protesting gay marriage. Like, it made absolutely no sense. My mom, being my mom that she is, calmly rolled down the windows and she looked at them and she screamed at the top of her lungs, "Never! Never!" Rolled up the windows. And my aunts were like, why would you do that? It's like, who cares? And it's like, this is my mom, and I love her. This is the type of.
I've never met this woman, but I'm in love with her. Oh my god.
So this is the woman that introduced me to Golden Girls that I would watch with her on Friday nights. Because no, it was Thursday, Friday nights. It was like one of those things. Saturday night. It was one of those nights. We never missed it, and it had very, very scandalous humor, which my mom said, "Well, didn't bother her, so why should it bother us?" And as a result, because it was such great bonding time for my brother, my mom, and me, we just like loved them, and we would always watch it just constantly. And yeah, it was just such a great memories with my mom.
Sweet.
Yes. What's the mistake that sitcom production design teams that just sets your teeth on edge? So I'm generally never as worried in terms of in terms of mistake. Just because I know they're trying to do it for TV, but I think the biggest one is just they for me they just don't think about their space. So it's sort of and when I say that, it's sort of like if you have to open the oven door, that means that there has to be room for you to open the door. So they're just like very simple things. It's a spacing issue of they're trying to cram everything into one place. And even though there are small kitchens, you generally don't want to have have that because it's also a safety issue. So just really badly decorated kitchens just never think about someone actually has to cook in this place. So generally when you see badly designed kitchens, it's because no one has ever thought to cook there. No one has ever thought to cook there. No one thinks about, okay, you open the refrigerator has to open wide. And you don't put it, oh my god, you don't put it next to an oven. You do not put your fridge right next to the oven. That's bad. It's literally bad feng shui. Feng shui, you don't put water next to fire. You don't put your fridge right next to the oven. It makes absolutely no sense. It's bad juju. Even the Chinese say, why are you doing that? Why do you do this? Oh, oh god, here's one. Do not put your kitchen sink right next to the oven unless you want your house to burn down. Please don't do this. Why do you do this? Sorry, I just kind of thought of all the bad things that you can do. I was thinking, it's not anything, and then it's like all the bad things.
Man, what if I want my ice cream half melted and warm?
Ew.
Get out. Get out now.
Are you saying you've never made faux crepes where you just get a tortilla and you throw it in the microwave and then you throw a scoop of ice cream on there and roll it up and now you have a crepe?
Okay, that sounds good. But
Okay.
I can't afford. I
Never
can't go
heard of
out to
that.
a real crepe place, so I just kind of make my homemade crepes. But I can't do that with the pans and the very thin stuff. So just use a tortilla.
This feels like some sort of culinary-based crime which has no penalty. Is
Oh, wait a minute.
Only if I make it a burrito. No?
Oh.
Yes?
Only you have to have
No?
chocolate on there if you want to make it a cannoli, and that's custom.
No?
Oh my
I
god.
live with a Nutella and strawberry burrito. I could be about that.
Yeah. See.
Oh, I apologize to the chat because I didn't realize that the only thing you were seeing was just the former house, and you didn't see any of us and me reacting to things badly or that escalating. Again, it was one of those scenarios where I wasn't. I was ranting and raving. I forgot to look at the OBS. I'm like, I am so sorry about that.
passion, the fire,
The
the
fire!
single-minded determination.
Oh my god. I didn't think my lecture was gonna be that long. I just
Yeah,
I
how
just
many
nerded
drinks are in
out.
it for?
Like I had a bunch of notes, and there were times when I just was not looking at my notes because I was just getting into the real production design. It's like this is why it's like this, and this is why it's like
Nerd out on the cool stuff. That's what we want.
Good.
That's what we're here for.
Oh, while I'm thinking about it, chat. I do need help, and that is come up with what our next month's topic should be. And we'll do that. Like I came up with ideas that didn't work, but if you have ideas, then I will start recruiting people with those lectures. I'm gonna have everyone just contribute a potential idea, and we'll see if it's a good idea. And we want to keep it general enough for people to submit. I'm gonna have Jono. Like, what would be a good topic to do a lecture on?
Ooh.
And you want to keep it broad.
Yeah, right, absolutely. So, with gaming, both tabletop, computer, and LARP becoming more of a thing, I would love, and I mean, I ranted at you about this a little bit. I would love to hear about from different generations and different styles of gamer. I would love to hear about people's perspective on that.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, especially like between like people of color, tabletop versus computer, LARP, and different generations, and that would be super cool. And then the other thing I would like to hear about is people's interactions with animals. It's like conservation, pets, if you foster, all of that kind of shit would be really, really cool, especially because people have such different relations to animals, and yet we're all humans, so we just like spew social bonding fucking everywhere we go.
Oh, that's animals and games. Those are two solid lectures. Trevor, any ideas?
Well, really broad would be land, and that ties into geography, geology, but also like land ownership. Which goes into like colonialization and Native American land and indigenous land and mining, neocolonialism, like all sorts of stuff like that. Which also, all ties into each other. The geology is very tied into a lot of the neocolonial land taking that occurs. So there's that. And then, I mean, personally, I would be like, pirates. Like, who doesn't love pirates? I would love to hear more about different pirate stuff. It's just kind of like fun. I think land would be have a much broader. Water rights as well and stuff like that.
Yeah, water. I like the idea of water effects, like special effects. That's a good pod topic. Tessa, ideas?
Maybe a theme of kids say the darndest things. I feel like we have like a history of adults as like every thing, but we don't have a lot of information on kids or like what they did, and I think that's probably going to be weird or hilarious because kids say the darndest things. Like technically, Joan of Arc was just a teenager vibing until like the whole of France figured out what that was. And what else? Maybe chemicals. Like medicine is chemicals, cleaning products, chemicals, everything chemicals. So I feel like people could do something on that. I don't know.
Yeah, those are all good. The top of my head, like I was about to say games. Like Jono, I love the potential interpretations of games, and now I'm kind of like even more excited about the idea of doing games because there are so many ways and so many types of games. I was gonna do like something
so much just in the time frame that like I've been around and you've been around, just the popular culture conception of games has been completely flipped.
Mhm. A couple of ideas that I had was um, one of them is a little bit more vague. It's more like, what's happening in this photograph? Because that can be something personal, that could be something historical. Another one, I may not get as many hits on this, but I always am curious about people's relation to the subject, and that is a lecture on your most famous relative.
Ah. Is that just famous, or does that include infamous as well?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
What are you implying, Trevor?
I've nothing at all. I don't know anything about ancestors.
But it could also be a different like take on what you consider like fame or something like noteworthy. So um like in my family, like I have relatives who were I had relatives that were imprisoned by the Marcos regime. Um so it's my grandmother was one of the first female softball players in the Philippines. It's like there are different ways to tackle this idea. So it's a so it might be like these are potential things that we may look at. Um, but I am very very open to like some of just some ideas. If you feel like you have any, um, I chances are I'll have another drinking stream because that's what I do. It's my part of my branding now, which is weird. And I guess in a week I'd like to make an announcement on what the next topic is, and I always throw it to everybody on what is. Although I'm not gonna lie, it might be games because I like John. I really like your take on this. Like any of these would probably work, and then we'll come up with a thing. Um, until then, where can people find you on the internet? Let's start off with Jonna. Where can people find you? And if there's any kind of things that you want to promote, please let us know.
So let's see. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Absolutely. Go for
Innovative.
it.
So let's see. Here we go. So like the first thing I would like to share is just go back to some of these references because they're all fucking excellent.
Mhm.
And again, so for background, I teach middle school, and oh my fucking Christ, this book, if you want to have a really solid, interesting narrative of history, read this damn thing. But then also, so you had Anthea Tooley recently on one of your casts, and Refuge LARP San Francisco. I am one of the writers there, so of course I got to give shout out to that. We're really working to build a positive community, and then this is something that actually, Ryan, you will probably also be completely and utterly down to endorse. DR NorCal.
DR NorCal!
I have had a shit ton of reservations about Dystopia Rising for a whole load of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I must say that Kai and Tobias and then Jason and then Shay have put so much effort into making a positive game. And they work really hard to be proactive about getting ahead of problems. And so just I have difficulty. I'm going to stop taking up everyone's screen. I have difficulty saying enough good things about them. So Refuge San Francisco, please come check it out. I write for that. I write for one of their campaigns. Dystopia Rising NorCal. Kai is an absolute fucking darling. Tobias is just, and then Jason was great. Shay is, in my opinion, even better, but biased. And then come and check out Refuge. And then check out the books and articles that I put up as references. They're all solid as fuck.
All right, Trevor, where can people find you on the internet? And please promote anything you would like to promote.
So I'm not really don't really have a whole lot of stuff. You can find me on LinkedIn for any of my archaeology stuff, but that's mostly business related. I would like to kind of add on to a book list of people who might of things that might be interesting, and that is an Indigenous History of the United States, which is a great book to to read. And if you get the chance to throw that into any of your classes, Jono, I would very much recommend it. There's also
I will check that out.
yeah, there's also the Queer History of the United States, which goes through that as well. It's the same sort of thing as Indigenous History of the United States, so both of those are good plugs. And the one thing I will say is I am starting a stream video. I'm not really totally sure where that's going to go, called the Drunk Archaeologist, where I will get progressively drunk and answer everyone's questions about whatever archaeology stuff they have, as inane as they want or as weird as they want, such as why do archaeologists like to lick things? It's a question, a very important question. So I'll be answering stuff like that, as well as more serious things as like what indigenous lands are you living on? So
Oh
yeah,
my!
I'm not quite sure when that's going to start up. I'm expecting sometime next month, but I'll put it around.
All right. Thank you, Tessa. Where can people find you on the internet? And please let us know things you'd like to plug.
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at AssetTessa1. It's a palindrome and then one because someone took the original palindrome, and then AssetTessa101 because that was slightly more like a palindrome, I guess. On Facebook. On this Friday, I'm releasing some photos that I took at Littoral Falls, Oregon for a LARP that I am part of and kind of part of vaguely the production in, called Starfall Academy. So I guess I can screen share and show y'all that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a essentially Jedi school LARP that's going to be pretty awesome. And in the special effects alien makeup here is Alex Richmond, owner of Quest Adventure Games. We're working heavily with Ludo Sport to actually run some lightsaber like martial arts trainings while it's there. And there's a whole bunch of lore that's dropping in the archives, which I think is why I am going to be dropping some of those mysterious photos on Friday. So follow Starfall Academy for more updates and seeing when that LARP will, one day happen when it's safe.
All right. And I am your host for today, Ryan Omega. You could find me here tomorrow at 8 p.m. running my game of Purgatory Cafe, where angels, devils, and baristas all meet in one place. And there might be a fight breaking out because one ex-angel decided to taunt a head angel. You know where to find me, and we'll see what happens when a fight might potentially break out. Oh yeah, the apocalypse is also coming. And that is all in one game. That's tomorrow here at 8 p.m. Over at Gilding Light, Saturdays at 1 p.m. is my ongoing D&D game of Poison Tulips, and that is tabloid writers that are bards. We have a special guest, Michelle Warren Bradley, who is a longtime pageant coordinator of the Mixed Candelabra beauty pageant. And she suspects that, after running a beauty pageant for 50 years, someone's out to sabotage her and the pageant, and we'll see if our reporters can do anything about it. So that is 1 p.m. over on twitch.tv/Gilding Light. All right, we're going to before doing that, I wanted to thank all of our watchers, all of our subscribers, all of our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for all of your support that enables us to do a lot of these things, especially fun shows like this. I love this show so much because I get talented friends to talk about really amazing things, and this day is no different. Oh my god. I love you all. You are amazing. We're gonna use this time to try to raid our friends. I think we're gonna raid our friends over at the Scabby Rooster, who have been like huge supporters of us. Um, ever since we kind of did our venture. So we're gonna show them some love. We need to come up with a raid call because we always try to come up with something that's germane to our discussions today. What's a good raid call?
Obscure.
What?
Obscure.
Obscure?
Obscure. Oh, Trevor, you were muted when you said
I
your
was
thing.
just wild card.
WildCard! Okay, I'm down for that. We're gonna raid them and we're just gonna say WildCard. Again, thank you so much for attending. We'll announce soon what the next topic is. And everyone, have a good evening.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Oh, let's make our raid Moonshine and Bourbon. I like that. Moonshine and Bourbon.
Moonshine and bourbon?
Moonshine and Bourbon.
That
I like that raid call. Good suggestion. Bye.